The laughter hit her before the words did. Soft at first. Then louder. Spreading through the courtroom like poison. Judge Harland Crowe leaned forward on his bench, black robes draped over his shoulders, one hand pressed to his chest in theatrical amusement. The other hand pointed directly at her face. "Ms. Rowan," he said, dragging her name like it tasted bitter. "This isn't Washington. You don't walk in here wearing red and expect this court to roll out a carpet." The gallery erupted. Snickers. Chuckles. The sound of people who had learned exactly when to laugh at the judge's jokes. Nyelle Rowan stood still. Coral red suit. Tailored. Deliberate. Beige case file tucked under her arm. Hair pulled back in a sleek low bun. Expression calm. Jaw tight. She didn't flinch. Didn't react. Just watched him dig his own grave with every word. "Counsel," Crowe continued, waving his hand dismissively at her folder. "I assume you're here to observe and not disrupt my courtroom with whatever social experiment this is." More laughter. The clerk didn't look up from her desk. The bailiff shifted his weight but said nothing. Everyone in their practiced roles. Witnesses to ritual humiliation. Participants in a system that had learned exactly who to punish and who to protect. What Judge Crowe didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that the woman he was mocking held a title that would end his career before sunset. But we'll get to that satisfying moment. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when this satisfying judge discovers exactly who he's been laughing at. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from today. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look? Share your experience below. And if you want to be entered in our video shout-out giveaway, simply subscribe now, then comment, "I subbed," and you will be entered. This video's shout-out giveaway goes to Edward Patrick from Tennessee. Thanks for being part of the familia and supporting. Now, it's time to get back into the story. "Your Honor," Nyelle said, her voice cutting through the fading laughter. Clear. Measured. "I'm here pursuant to a federal judicial review request." Crowe's eyebrows shot up. Then he laughed again. Louder this time. "Federal?" He slapped the bench. "Did you hear that? Federal review." He looked around the courtroom, inviting everyone to share in the joke. "Ms. Rowan, I've been on this bench for 30 years. 30 years. And every few months, someone walks in here with a fancy folder and big words, thinking they can tell me how to run my courtroom." He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "They all leave the same way. Quietly. With nothing." Nyelle didn't move. "Your Honor, if I could explain the nature of—" "No." The gavel cracked against wood. "You don't get to explain. You get to observe. Or you get to leave." He pointed toward the gallery. "Pick a seat. Stay quiet. And maybe you'll learn how a real courtroom operates." The gallery waited. Watching. Wondering if this woman in the coral suit would fight back. She didn't. "Very well, Your Honor," she said. "I'll observe." She turned and walked toward the gallery. Found a seat in the back row. Opened her case file. Began to write. Crowe smiled, satisfied with his victory. He had no idea. In the third row of the gallery, an older black man in a worn navy blazer sat with his hands folded. Knuckles white. Jaw clenched. Eyes fixed on the woman who had just taken her seat. His daughter. The daughter he had raised alone. The daughter he had braided hair for and sold his truck for and worked 2 jobs for. The daughter Judge Crowe had tried to take from him 15 years ago in this very courtroom. Caleb Rowan didn't move. Didn't react. He had learned long ago that black men showing emotion in courtrooms became black men out of control. So he sat still. And watched his daughter write. And waited for the moment that would change everything. Caleb's hands hadn't stopped shaking since he walked into the courthouse. Same marble floors. Same fluorescent lights. Same smell of old paper and older prejudice. 15 years. 15 years since he'd stood in this building, fighting for the right to raise his own child. And nothing had changed. The same seal hung behind the bench. The same American flag drooped in the corner. The same Judge Harland Crowe sat in the same chair, wearing the same black robes, wielding the same arrogance like a weapon. Caleb watched the first case of the morning. Black defendant. Young man, early 20s. Nonviolent drug charge. First offense. Crowe barely let him speak. "You people never learn," the judge muttered. Loud enough for the gallery to hear. Quiet enough to claim deniability. Sentence, 18 months. Maximum guidelines. The young man's mother sobbed in the front row. No one comforted her. Second case. White defendant. Similar charge. Third offense. Crowe's entire demeanor shifted. "Everyone makes mistakes," he said, voice softening. "The question is whether we learn from them." Sentence, probation. Community service. The defendant's family hugged each other. Caleb felt the heat rise in his chest. The same heat he'd felt 15 years ago. standing where that young black man had just stood, fighting for his daughter. He remembered Crowe's face that day. The way the judge had looked at him. Like a stain on the courtroom floor. Like something to be cleaned up and forgotten. A single father? Crowe had said. Raising a little girl alone? That's unconventional. Unconventional. The word had followed Caleb for 15 years. Every job interview where they asked about his situation. Every parent-teacher conference where they assumed a woman would come. Every time someone looked at him with his daughter and asked, "Where's her mother?" Unconventional. As if loving your child was radical. As if protecting her was strange. He had won custody that day. But the victory tasted like ash. Crowe had made sure of that. "I'm giving you a chance, Mr. Rowan. Don't waste it." As if his own daughter was a gift from the court. Not his right. His gift. Now Caleb sat in the same gallery, watching the same judge mock a black woman for daring to exist in his space. Except this time, the woman was his daughter. And she was writing everything down. Every case. Every sentence. Every "you people" that slipped from Crowe's lips. Caleb watched her pen move across the paper. Steady. Precise. Relentless. She wasn't just observing. She was building a case. And Crowe had no idea the evidence against him was sitting in his own courtroom, wearing a coral red suit, taking notes. Marianne died on a Tuesday. Caleb found her on the kitchen floor. Coffee still brewing. Toast still in the toaster. Her body already cold. Aneurysm. Sudden. No warning. One moment she was alive. The next she was gone. Nyelle was 6 years old. She stood in the doorway in her pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit, asking why mommy was sleeping on the floor. Caleb didn't have an answer. Didn't have words. Just scooped her up and carried her to the neighbor's house and called 911 and watched the paramedics shake their heads. The funeral was 3 days later. Caleb held Nyelle's hand through the whole service. She didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just stared at the casket like she was waiting for her mother to sit up and say it was all a mistake. She didn't. The day after the funeral, Caleb received a court summons. Marianne's parents had filed for custody. They claimed a single father couldn't manage. Claimed Nyelle needed stability. The kind only a proper family could provide. Caleb stood in family court 48 hours after burying his wife. No lawyer. Couldn't afford one. Same navy blazer he'd worn to the funeral. Judge Harland Crowe looked down at him from the bench. "Mr. Rowan," Crowe said. "You work 2 jobs?" "Yes, Your Honor. City transit by day. Warehouse security by night." "And who watches the child during these hours?" "My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She's retired. She loves Nyelle." Crowe made a note. His pen scratched against paper like a knife. "You have no family support?" "My mother passed 3 years ago. My father when I was young." "And Ms. Rowan's family? The grandparents filing this motion?" "They live in Connecticut, Your Honor. They've seen Nyelle maybe 6 times in her life." Crowe looked at Marianne's parents. Well-dressed. Well-spoken. Lawyer beside them. Then looked back at Caleb. "Mr. Rowan, do you know how to braid hair?" The question hit him like a slap. "I'm learning, Your Honor." "Can you cook balanced meals?" "Yes, Your Honor." "What about when she needs feminine guidance? When she has questions about womanhood?" Caleb kept his voice steady. "I'll find a way, Your Honor. That's what parents do." Crowe leaned back. A single father. Raising a little girl alone. He let the silence stretch. "That's unconventional." The gallery murmured. Someone laughed. Caleb stood still. Absorbing it. Refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. The hearing lasted 2 hours. Marianne's parents painted him as absent. Uninvolved. Incapable. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter in that courtroom. Narrative mattered. And the narrative said black fathers fail. In the end, Crowe ruled in Caleb's favor. Barely. "I'm giving you a chance, Mr. Rowan," the judge said. "Don't waste it." Caleb walked out with Nyelle's hand in his. She looked up at him. "Did we win, Daddy?" He squeezed her hand. "Yeah, baby. We won." But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving. And he never forgot Judge Crowe's face. Never forgot the laughter. Never forgot the word that would echo through 15 years of his life. Unconventional. Caleb learned to braid hair from YouTube. The same tutorial. 17 times. His fingers fumbled with the comb. Struggled with the parts. Couldn't figure out how to hold 3 sections and add more hair at the same time. Nyelle sat on the floor between his knees, patient as a saint. "It's okay, Daddy," she said. "Try again." So he did. And again. And again. By the 18th try, he had something that resembled braids. Nyelle looked in the mirror and smiled. "They're beautiful, Daddy." They weren't. But she wore them to school anyway. Proud. That's how Caleb learned to be a father. Trial and error. Late nights. Early mornings. YouTube tutorials and library books and advice from Mrs. Patterson next door. He worked 2 jobs. City transit from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. Warehouse security from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. He slept 4 hours. Sometimes 3. But every morning, he made Nyelle breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Orange juice. The same meal Marianne used to make. He walked her to school. Picked her up. Sat with her at the kitchen table while she did homework. Math problems he didn't understand. Science projects he couldn't explain. History essays about people he'd never heard of. But he sat there anyway. Present. That was his only rule. Be present. When Nyelle was 12, the truck broke down. Transmission gone. Repair estimate, $3,000. Caleb had $900 in savings. But Nyelle needed braces. And new school clothes. And the summer camp all her friends were attending. He sold the truck. Took the bus to work. Added 2 hours to his commute. Never told her why. Why are we taking the bus now, Daddy? Good for the environment, he said. She didn't question it. Or maybe she did, and chose not to ask. Years later, she told him, I knew, Dad. I always knew. He just shrugged. That's what fathers do. When Nyelle decided on law school, Caleb didn't hesitate. LSAT prep cost $1,800. He had $900 saved. So he worked overtime. Took extra shifts. Skipped his own doctor's appointments. I'm fine, he told her. Focus on studying. She got into Howard Law. Full scholarship. The day the acceptance letter came, Caleb read it 3 times. Then went into the bathroom and cried where she couldn't see. Then came out smiling. I knew you could do it. She hugged him so tight his ribs ached. He didn't mind. The night before law school graduation, Caleb gave her an envelope. What's this? Something I wrote. A long time ago. She opened it later. Alone in her dorm room. A letter. Handwritten. Dated 15 years earlier. The day after the custody hearing. It said, they told me I couldn't raise you right. This letter is my promise to prove them wrong. If you're reading this, I did. Love, Dad. Nyelle didn't call him that night. She showed up at his apartment instead. Stood in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. You did, Dad, she whispered. You did. He held her the way he had when she was 6. When the world fell apart and he was all she had. I always believed in you, he said. Even when no one else did. For the first time in 15 years, the word unconventional didn't hurt anymore. The phone call came at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday. Nyelle answered on the second ring. Justice Rowan? She paused. Still not used to the title. Yes? This is Margaret Chen, Chief of Staff for the President. He'd like to speak with you about the Supreme Court vacancy. 3 weeks later, Nyelle stood in a private room at the White House. No press. No cameras. No political circus. Just her, the President, and a Bible. Raise your right hand. She did. Do you solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic? I do. To bear true faith and allegiance to the same? I do. And to faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which you are about to enter? I do. The President smiled. Congratulations, Justice Rowan. In the corner of the room, Caleb Rowan stood in his navy blazer. The same one he'd worn to Marianne's funeral. The same one he'd worn to the custody hearing. The same one he wore to every moment that mattered. His daughter was now a Supreme Court justice. And he was the only witness. That's how Nyelle wanted it. Quiet. Private. Without spectacle. The work matters, she told him afterward. Not the title. Her first request surprised everyone. I want to conduct judicial integrity reviews. Personally. Her colleagues raised eyebrows. Why not send staff? Why go yourself? Because I need to see it. Not read about it. See it. She spent months reviewing courts. Small counties. Rural districts. Places where federal oversight rarely reached. She watched judges. Documented patterns. Noted disparities. Most were clean. Some were careless. One was corrupt to the bone. Judge Harland Crowe. His name appeared in complaint after complaint. Sealed files. Buried investigations. 30 years of bias hidden behind judicial immunity. Nyelle pulled his case history. Sentencing disparities. Custody rulings. Dismissive treatment of black defendants, black attorneys, black families. A pattern so consistent it couldn't be coincidence. Then she found a case from 15 years ago. Custody dispute. Single father versus maternal grandparents. Petitioner, Caleb Rowan. Her father. She read the transcript 3 times. Every word Crowe had said. Every question designed to humiliate. Every laugh from the gallery. A single father? Raising a little girl alone? That's unconventional. Her hands trembled. Not from fear. From rage. She called her father that night. Why didn't you tell me? Silence on the other end. Then, because you didn't need that weight. You had enough to carry. Dad. You were 6 years old, Nyelle. You just lost your mother. You didn't need to know how hard I had to fight to keep you. She closed her eyes. All those years. All those sacrifices. And he'd carried this alone. I'm going to that courtroom, she said. I'm going to review him personally. I know. He won't recognize me. It's been 15 years. I was a child. I know. Silence. Then Caleb said, that's why I'm coming with you. Dad, you don't have to. Yes. I do. His voice was steady. Certain. I sat in that courtroom 15 years ago and said nothing. Took his insults. Thanked him for giving me my own daughter. I've carried that shame every day since. He paused. This time, I'm going to watch him fall. And I'm going to be there when he realizes exactly who he destroyed himself in front of. Nyelle felt tears on her cheeks. Okay, Dad. Okay. I love you. I love you too, baby girl. Now let's go finish this. The clerk rolled her eyes before Nyelle even reached the door. Gallery seating is for observers, the woman said, not bothering to look up from her desk. Not participants. Nyelle nodded politely. I understand. The clerk muttered something under her breath as Nyelle walked past. Another one who thinks she's important. Nyelle wrote it down. Time. Date. Exact words. The woman had no idea she was being documented. That every dismissal, every sneer, every muttered insult was becoming evidence against the culture of this courtroom. Nyelle found a seat in the back row of the gallery. Caleb was already there. Third row. Navy blazer pressed. Hands folded. They didn't acknowledge each other. Couldn't risk recognition. She opened her case file and waited. The bailiff approached before the first case was called. Ma'am, you'll need to silence your phone. Nyelle held up her phone. Already silenced. He didn't apologize. Just grunted and walked away. The white man in the suit 2 seats over? The bailiff nodded at him. Smiled. Moved on without a word. Nyelle noted it. The selectivity. Who gets warnings? Who gets courtesy? The small humiliations that accumulate into culture. Into how things work here. Into a system that punishes people who look like her for existing in its space. All rise. The gallery stood. Judge Harland Crowe entered through the side door. Black robes flowing. Gray hair swept back. That same smirk Nyelle had seen in every photograph, every complaint, every sealed file. He took his seat like a king settling into a throne. Looked out at the courtroom. His courtroom. His kingdom. His eyes passed over Nyelle. Paused for a moment on her coral suit. Then moved on. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? She was just another black woman in a courtroom full of them. Waiting to be processed. Waiting to be judged. By a man who had already decided who deserved dignity and who didn't. First case of the day. Black defendant. Young woman. Missed court date due to car trouble. Crowe's tone was ice. Excuses don't interest me. Consequences do. He revoked her bond. Sent her to holding. The woman's children were in the gallery. 2 little girls. Maybe 6 and 8. They started crying when the bailiff led their mother away. Crowe didn't look at them. Second case. White defendant. Missed 3 court dates. Multiple violations. Crowe leaned forward with concern. Life gets complicated. I understand. Let's reschedule and move forward. No revoked bond. No holding cell. Just understanding. Nyelle's pen moved faster. Every disparity. Every tone shift. Every double standard laid bare in the fluorescent light. Then she heard it. The phrase she had read in her father's transcript. A single mother stood before the bench, fighting for custody of her son. Black woman. Tired eyes. No lawyer. Crowe looked at her file. A single mother. Raising a boy alone. He paused. That's unconventional. The word hit Nyelle like a fist. Unconventional. The same word he had used on her father. 15 years ago. Different victim. Same weapon. This wasn't ignorance. This was ritual. Practiced. Perfected. Repeated for 30 years. And finally, someone was writing it all down. Nyelle's heels clicked against the courtroom floor. Every eye turned. Every whisper stopped. She walked toward the front of the courtroom with her case file visible. Coral suit pressed. Expression neutral. The walk of a woman who had made a decision and would not be moved from it. Judge Crowe watched her approach with growing irritation. Counsel, he said before she could speak. I thought I told you to observe. Your Honor, I need to address the court. You need to sit down. I have documentation that requires your immediate attention. Crowe's face reddened. I don't care what you have. This is my courtroom. My rules. My schedule. He pointed his gavel at her. Sit down. The gallery held its breath. Nyelle didn't move. Your Honor, I'm here pursuant to. I know what you're here for, Crowe interrupted. Federal review. You said that already. And I told you this isn't Washington. He leaned forward. You people always come in here talking about oversight. About reform. About accountability. He spit the words like they tasted rotten. But you never seem to understand how things work in the real world. You people. The phrase hung in the air. Nyelle wrote it down. Exact quote. Time stamp. Your Honor, she said calmly. Your conduct over the past decade has resulted in multiple sealed complaints. The gavel cracked. That's enough. Crowe's voice echoed off the wood paneling. I will not be lectured by. He paused. His eyes moved over her. Her braids. Her skin. Her presence. Someone who clearly doesn't belong at this level of legal discourse. The words landed like stones. The courtroom went silent. Even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Crowe had said the quiet part loud. In front of witnesses. In front of recording devices. In front of a Supreme Court justice. He just didn't know it yet. Nyelle turned slowly. Looked toward the gallery. Her father's eyes met hers. Just for a second. That look said everything. I'm okay. Trust me. This is the moment. She turned back to the bench. Let the silence stretch. Let Crowe feel powerful. One last time. Then she spoke. Very well, Your Honor. Her voice was calm. Almost gentle. For the record. She paused. Please note. The courtroom leaned forward. Something in her tone had shifted. Something in the air had changed. And Judge Harland Crowe, for the first time in 30 years, felt a flicker of doubt. 6 seconds. That's how long the silence lasted. 6 seconds where Judge Harland Crowe's face traveled from confusion to recognition to pure, unfiltered terror. Please note, Nyelle said, her voice cutting through the stillness like a blade, that I am Justice Nyelle Rowan of the United States Supreme Court. She paused. Let it land. Assigned to conduct an unannounced judicial integrity review under Article 3 authority. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. The clerk's pen clattered to the floor. The bailiff's hand froze on his belt. And Judge Crowe, the man who had laughed and pointed and mocked, sat frozen on his bench with his mouth hanging open. What? He whispered. Nyelle opened her case file. Pulled out credentials. Federal seal gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Signed authorization from the Chief Justice. Official letterhead. She placed them on the bench. Within his reach. Close enough to see every detail. Crowe's eyes scanned the documents. Searching for error. Searching for escape. Finding neither. These are real? His voice cracked like a boy's. Would you like to verify with Washington, Your Honor? He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The clerk was already on the phone, face pale, hands shaking. The bailiff had stepped back. Away from contamination. Away from the man who had just destroyed himself. The gallery erupted in whispers. Phones came out. Recording now. Everyone suddenly brave when the powerful had fallen. Crowe tried to recover. Tried to find his authority. Justice Rowan, there must be a misunderstanding. He straightened his robes. Cleared his throat. My earlier comments were what? Nyelle interrupted. Misheard? Misinterpreted? Taken out of context? She held up her phone. I have a recording. As do my colleagues watching via secure feed from Washington. Every word. Every insult. Every, you people. Transmitted live to the highest court in the country. Crowe's face went gray. No, Nyelle said softly. This isn't a misunderstanding. She opened her folder again. Pulled out documents. Case numbers. Dates. Transcripts. Statistical analyses. 67 complaints filed against you over 30 years. 43 sealed without investigation. She set them on the bench. Sentencing disparities averaging 32% higher for black defendants versus white defendants with identical charges and criminal histories. Another document. Custody rulings favoring white petitioners over black petitioners at a rate of 4-to-1, regardless of circumstances. Another. Documented instances of racial language in your courtroom, reported by attorneys, defendants, and court staff. All buried. All ignored. She looked at him. Not with anger. With certainty. That's not judicial discretion, Your Honor. That's discrimination. Crowe's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I have served this court for 30 years. I know, Nyelle interrupted. That's how long you've been doing this. Then she said the words her father had waited 15 years to hear. Your treatment of single fathers, particularly black fathers, will be reviewed retroactively. Crowe's head snapped up. What? Every custody case. Every ruling. Every comment you made about unconventional family structures. The word hit him like a bullet. Unconventional. He remembered saying it. Probably said it 100 times. Never thought it would come back. But it had. In the voice of a Supreme Court justice. Who used to be a little girl. A little girl he had almost taken from her father. Crowe's eyes found Caleb in the gallery. Recognition finally dawning. The same last name. The same quiet dignity. The man he had humiliated 15 years ago. Sitting in his courtroom. Watching his daughter dismantle his career. Rowan, Crowe whispered. You're. He couldn't finish the sentence. Nyelle didn't help him. Just stood there. Letting him connect the dots. Letting him understand exactly how far his arrogance had carried him. And exactly how far he was about to fall. The federal marshals arrived within the hour. Then the investigators from the Office of Judicial Conduct. Then attorneys from the Department of Justice. The courthouse that had felt untouchable for 30 years now crawled with people Crowe had never had to answer to. Boxes of files were pulled from storage. Computers were imaged. Staff were separated and questioned. Crowe sat in his chambers, door open so they could watch him, while lawyers explained exactly how much trouble he was in. His black robes hung on the back of a chair. Removed. His authority stripped before any formal action. This was just the beginning of the end. The clerk who had rolled her eyes at Nyelle was being interviewed in a conference room. Explaining her comments. Suddenly not so dismissive. I didn't mean anything by it, she kept saying. I was just having a bad day. The bailiff who had singled out Nyelle was on administrative leave. Pending review of his conduct. The gallery who had laughed at Crowe's jokes were being asked for statements. Witnesses to their own complicity. Some refused to speak. Some cooperated eagerly, suddenly remembering every inappropriate thing they'd seen over the years. All of them understood, they were part of the record now. Part of the pattern that Nyelle had documented. The culture of a courtroom doesn't exist in one person. It exists in everyone who lets it continue. Nyelle sat with investigators in a borrowed office. Going through cases one by one. This one, she said, pointing to a file. Single black father. Lost custody for instability. The white mother had 2 DUI convictions. She kept the children. The investigator wrote it down. This one. Black defendant, first offense. Maximum sentence. White defendant, third offense, same charge. Probation. Page after page. Year after year. A career of cruelty hidden in plain sight. How did no one catch this? The investigator asked. Nyelle looked at him. Because no one looked. Because complaints were sealed. Because the people with power to investigate were the same people who benefited from the system staying exactly as it was. She paused. Until now. By evening, Crowe's resignation was drafted. His lawyers recommended it. Better to resign than be removed. Better to go quietly than face public impeachment. He signed it with shaking hands. The signature of a man who had signed so many fates. Now signing his own. No pension. No ceremony. No portrait in the courthouse hall. Just a name added to a list. Judges removed for cause. 30 years of unchecked power. Undone in one afternoon. By a woman he had mocked for wearing red. But it didn't stop with Crowe. The investigation expanded. Other judges in the same district showed similar patterns. 3 more under review. 2 clerks terminated. New training mandated. Oversight protocols enhanced. Nyelle had lit a match. But the fire spread. Because systems don't rot alone. They rot together. And healing requires burning it all down. To build something better. The sun was setting when Nyelle walked out of the courthouse. Orange and gold light washed over the stone steps. The same steps where defendants had walked for 30 years, carrying sentences that were never fair. Caleb was waiting for her. Same navy blazer. Same quiet dignity. Same man who had raised her alone when the world said he couldn't. She walked straight to him. And hugged him. Tight. The way he had hugged her when she was 6 and scared and didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming back. You did it, he said into her hair. She shook her head. We did it. No, baby girl. This was you. I just sat in the gallery. She pulled back. Looked at him. You did more than sit, Dad. You survived. You raised me. You showed me what strength looks like when it doesn't have money or power or connections. Her voice cracked. You taught me that justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what you went through. Caleb's eyes glistened. The letter you gave me, Nyelle continued. At graduation. I've read it every year since. I know, he said. That's why I wrote it. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the courthouse, the building that had held so much power over so many people. How many others? Nyelle asked quietly. How many fathers like you never got justice? Because they didn't have a daughter who became a Supreme Court justice? Caleb took her hand. That's why you keep going. Not for me. For them. The ones still waiting. The ones who think no one's coming. She nodded. I know. 6 months later, Caleb saw a news report. A custody case. Different county. Different judge. Single black father fighting for his children. The judge ruled in his favor. Fairly. Without mockery. Without the word unconventional. The father walked out of the courthouse with his kids. Smiling. Free. He didn't know about Nyelle Rowan. Didn't know about Caleb. Didn't know about Judge Crowe or the investigation or the reforms that had spread through the system. But he benefited from their fight. That's how change works. Invisible ripples. Reaching shores you'll never see. Caleb turned off the TV. Looked at the photo on his mantle. Nyelle at 6. Gap-toothed smile. Braids he had done himself. And next to it, Nyelle at her swearing in. Supreme Court Justice. Same smile. The system doesn't change because one man falls. It changes because someone finally documented the truth. Because someone refused to stay silent. Because a single father raised a daughter who became powerful enough to hold the system accountable. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that power isn't always loud and justice isn't always fast, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that inspires and challenges and reminds us what's possible. Drop a comment and tell us your story. Have you ever faced a system that seemed unbeatable? Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look or where you come from? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Because every judge who abuses power, every system that protects bias, every institution that silences truth, they all have one thing in common. They believe no one is watching. Prove them wrong. Watch. Document. Speak. The little girl from a single-father household is now a Supreme Court justice. What will you become? Until next time, stay vigilant. Stay vocal. Stay ready. Justice is coming. For everyone.